Hello and welcome back to Mandibil. I thought I would make a sort of roundup of things and use the time between the recent video in my series on my philosophy and the last video, which is going to be about ethics and a moral principle. And I would use this time frame while I prepare the last one, which I'm going to try to make absolutely sure that is as clean as it possibly can without, so if I find something that needs further development or precision or slight adjustment of my presentations earlier in order to make sure that everything is on track, I'll do it in at least this first status video, but maybe further status videos depending on the need, right? Okay, so we are somewhere down here between, in the scope of my philosophy, we are somewhere between objectivology and ethics and making sort of a status, okay? Okay, so first of all, I was doing some research on, the pointing hand I presented in the recent video on objectivology. And the pointing hand is actually something that has, when you go back in history, hands are quite important, right? Also, why is it that, for instance, Luke Skywalker has his hand cut off, right? I don't know if you know, but I'm very much into German expressionist, and expressionism in general is maybe it is one of my favorite areas of art, right? But particularly German expressionist movies from the 20s and maybe early 30s, right? In Metropolis, the magician, I forget his name, the scientist kind of guy who creates the robot. I forget, Rotlang. He has a fake hand. So it's an indication of that hand that hand is fake. When it points, it's a lie, right? Or there's a lie inherent in the pointing, and the lie part is the part I am dealing with when I'm saying the term I'm pointing at, right? You can go back to prehistoric cave art. There are some caves where the hands on, they have painted the hands. There's something very particular about hands, right? There's also in counting, we use our hands to count, right? One of the reasons I believe that 30 and 60 are cornerstones of counting and number system is that you have on each hand you have 5 fingers, each with 3 knuckles, or you can have 1, 2, 3, right? And 3 times 5 is 15, right? And 15 plus 15 is 30. And if you double that, you have 2 persons, that's 60, right? Or maybe you could use your toes. But 60 is a fundamental of the Babylonian number system, right? There's just something, the Egyptians used I don't remember the term used, but they used the underarm as the measure stick. How many underarms long is this? It was sufficiently clear in order to, I need a 10 underarm long piece of wood. So any grown person would arrive with something that is, almost a sufficiently well-defined length, right? So there seems to be something here about, hands and arms, and it's sort of, it's a height somewhere, I feel, right? So these are old clippings from books and newspapers and so on, right? There's the War Department, Washington, when John Wilkes Booth, who apparently shot Abe Lincoln, right? And there was a reward, and you see the pointing hand pointing to the reward. This is what you should have attention to, right? Pay attention to this particular aspect. When you see that hand, you're like, oh my God, right? Pointing, right? And there's also the bottom one, which it's an old one from the 1700s, right? But it's not. It was more common back in the day, right? But there's a road sign where there's a hand pointing that direction and that direction. You need to go there to get to that city, or you need to go there to get to that city, right? There's a lot of pointing going on. We still have road signs, right? Go there to get to, right? It's everywhere, basically, right? And also because I'm a particular interest in postal history and philately in general, right? There's this pointing hand, which is a return to center pointing hand, which is a marking used in the United States by the United States Postal Service, and it's been used for many years, and I think somewhere it's still being used. But during the 20th century, it was very common, and it's a return to center marking. Here it functions as a get back to the center, but it could be pointing in principle anywhere, but it is pointing to a destination or a point on the globe or somewhere where there's some object it needs to get to, right? It needs to get back to the center in that direction. There is no direction here. It's more conceptual, but you get the idea, right? These are you can go on any, eBay or something like that and find a return to center cover from the United States and even from other countries which went to the United States and had to return to another country, right? With these markings, there are actually collectors who specialize in these. So, just to give you an idea of it's not, I'm not just grabbing something out of the blue, though it might, the pointing? I've never, pointing in philosophy, what are you talking about, right? It's not as stupid as it may sound. Okay, so there's a few things, I don't know how well I will do this, but I'm trying to cover a few bases here, right? Okay, in one slide. Okay, so I promised Johnny Isometric that I would deal somewhat with, I don't remember the term he used, I'm paraphrasing, but something like bodily signals or something like that, right? Excuse if the lighting, I thought I had adjusted my video, my cameo window here, right? But apparently there's still some automatic function going on, so we'll have to deal with it. So if I disappear, it's not because I'm trying to get away from it. Body and hunger and pain, right? And the connection, the sort of the mind-body problem, maybe you could say, right? I'm not trying to connect mind and body as such, because of my lack of metaphysics, I don't need to deal with it. I have a particular experience, my hands and the arms connected to, and every time I decide to move my body and move my eyes and envision, it seems to be connected. I can do things that based on my mental capacity to regulate this thing, but I can't say cup move, right? But I can say arm move. So there seems to be connection. In my opinion, it would be stupid to say anything but, just because I can't get to the connection. So what I'm trying to illustrate here is that there is a me that has some connection points to body, my body. As I say, my is me body. It's me body, but you say my body grammatically, right? And ultimately, my body is connected to my hand, right? If I couldn't point, if the me couldn't point, my philosophy is dead, right? Because if I say you have to point and you can't point, I mean, no, but I can point. I just didn't mention that in my diagram earlier in my presentation. So I have to sort of connect the dots now, right? And also thanks for John Isometrics sort of reminding me about this way earlier, but now it's mandatory, right? Okay, so what I've kind of done is that there's still the me as an abstraction. And this presentation has sort of exploded the me into a two-dimensional presentation. But however that me works, I don't know. I have no clue, right? So I'm referring to aspects I only have some notion of or direct access to, which might be vision and so on, right? Or colors, you could say. So what I'm doing is I'm connecting the me with my body. But my body is cognitive because I'm cognizing my hand and my pointing finger, right? So I'm getting to the borderline of cognitions. And in the qualia, there are hunger and pain, which are, I consider, signals from within the confines of my body. My body seems to be subject to the same spatial composition or placement as all my other cognitions, of which I have the possibility of touching. That's why I've moved the tiger to touch my body, right? And because it can touch my body, I have to be alert, right? So there's a connection between the cognition and the hunger and the pains and the me. I could extend the me to touch my body, so to say. But it makes sense to place it like this because it seems like there's some stretched out connection points between body and hunger and pain and me, but it gels together. But I placed it like this because I can have a body and a me without having hunger and pain. So it's not completely correct, this, but it's a two-dimensional diagrammic presentation of some weird stuff that is possibly hugely complicated, right? That I can't even get to. So it's sort of a artistic presentation, maybe, right? Even. So it's kind of simple. When I have hunger and pain, I need to take care of my body. But confined to my body is all of this. My body contains me, and the me contains all of this, because all of this is actually an abstraction within me. I can't give you my qualia. I can't give you my cognitions. I can't give you my me, right? But you can, the only thing you have access to is my body. You don't have access to my body. You have access to the cognition of my body, right? But if my body is a cognition, then what I'm cognizing is not that which it is. And that's the old inside-outside dichotomy we get into here, right? The problem of the inside-outside paradox. I have to say, what I experience as my body is not my actual body, because that's what I'm saying when I'm experiencing an individual, which is the same kind of cognition. So when I'm experiencing an individual, I'm not actually experiencing that individual. But I'm saying, because of my ontology or my external world philosophy, there is something that it represents. So my body is also a representation of something I don't have access to. But I can deal with it anyhow, right? I just don't have access to what it actually is. I only have access to my cognition. So that's what I have to deal with. I'm not going to deal with what it actually is because I don't have access to it, and I'm not allowing myself to do it because of my philosophy. You see what I mean? And this is the tricky part of ontology and metaphysics, or the rejection of metaphysics, maybe you could say, right? This sort of where your abstraction starts to become an abstraction of an abstraction, maybe, and so on. It can very quickly get out of hand, right? So you have to be cool about this. What you're doing, make sure that you're constantly making what you're talking about, because it seems like also a guy like Bernardo Castro, who should be on top of this, right, seems to be sometimes switching between talking about the thing he doesn't have access to, or switching between, I should say, the thing that he doesn't have access to and the cognition of it. He's sort of switching back and forth, and you're not sure which one he's actually dealing with. So it's sort of it feels like a shell game, or sort of a, cloak and dagger, what's it called, smoke and mirrors, or, sort of you're being confused, right? So I have, what I've also done is I have extended the lingo to the external world. Because as soon as I make a sound, I can hear the sound, but what I've actually done or might have done, I don't have access to, right? I can hear the sound if I'm making a sound, but what is actually going on, of which the sound is a qualia, I don't have access to, but I'm axiomatically expecting the external world to be able to have a sound, right? Something is going, I have a sound of something I don't know what is. That don't know what is sort of travels, let's say, through the external world. But somebody else who has the ability of have the quality of sound might pick up what I'm doing and have that sound. Otherwise you wouldn't have a language, right? I'm just hoping it's going on, right? In a way. So when I do that, and I observe an individual reacting to my sound or my lingo, there's sort of a, okay, I expect this individual to actually have heard the sound of what I created and possibly understand it based on my judgment of the, right, of the interpretation of the sound according to my standards of my lingo, right? There's sort of a lot of taking some shit for granted in using language, you could say, right? You're sort of circumventing the gray area in a way. Language is sort of an encoded use of something you don't know what is, right? You can go back to also, and I won't deal with that. How do you impregnate language on somebody? Well, it's a training of developing cognitions or cognitive apparatus and adjusting the phenomena with the sound, right? When I see that elephant, I hear the sound elephant and I connect elephant with the cognition elephant, and that's how language is sort of built, right? Okay, but it starts early in human life, right? I suspect, that's my theory, that's my scientific theory, or maybe semi-philosophical scientific theory, whatever, right? But you see, I have, instead of connecting it with the individual, I'm actually more correctly connecting it with an external world, but a part of that external world, I am expecting an individual to have a me that I can't get to, that I'm actually provoking or impinging Bernardo Castro, right? I am, what's the term I used myself? I forget. Influenced. I'm influencing, right? In a way, in accordance with my language. And that's why when I point and lingo, the lingo goes into the person who then understand my lingo and pointing, and the pointing of the individual is that which points to the knowledge that we have to agree on. You see the picture of this? Okay. I actually think it makes kind of sense, right? But we have to keep this external world as a gray area all the time. So I have disconnected the individual, but I'm hoping to connect with the me part of the individual. The lingo is not talking to the individual. I'm talking to an expected me part of an individual of which I don't have access. Now, what I might be pointing at, there's a little hand in my body over there, right? I might be pointing at the apple, and I might be expecting the individual to raise its hand and point at that apple. Whatever. If I said apple and pointing, and I'm looking at the individual and awaiting some kind of response. But at the same time, because apple is what is, it's not objective to me. It's actually not completely correct. The apple should also be still a cognition. It's not, it cannot correctly be, but if I put a hand on the individual that points at the apple, which I possibly should have done now, I just realized, right? Then the apple is blue, because I would consider possibly, let's say, that this is objective now, and that's why it's light blue. It's a coding for this object or cognition is now objective because of the pointing and the lingo and so on, right? But let's say that the individual up there also has a hand that points at the apple, then the apple is blue because now we have objectivity, right? At the same time, there is a tiger biting my leg. So you see down there, there's a tiger touching my body, right? I have a pain. Maybe because of the hunger, I'm pointing at the apple, right? The pain is because of the tiger. So now I have an urgent issue, right? The tiger. I need to stop pointing and stop lingoing and deal with the tiger, right? You see the situation I'm in here, right? So, this is sort of the idea of the external world of communication I deal with, my hunger and pain in my body. The idea of history and reality. Okay. That is, history might not be as difficult, and I'm going to deal with it in the next slide, but reality is another story. This might need its own complete part to deal with it sufficiently. But I think what is going on with the idea of reality, because that's what it is. It's an idea. It's like a huge puzzle where you your whole life, using your memory and your expectations and your observations, has created this huge puzzle made up of memories and present observations and maybe an idea of the future. And I think it comes about because I have a field of view, as I've shown you here in that small, I find a small diagram there on Wikipedia, right? That I have a field of view. And if I view this, I have cognitions. But if I turn over here, I don't have those cognitions anymore, right? Now I have these cognitions, but I have a memory of those. I can see, I observe these, but I have a memory of these. If I turn now I'm back to those same cognitions, but now I have a memory of those. But by combining these two, I'm actually creating an idea of a scenario, right? Or a situation. And the idea of a situation which is combined from memories and the present is what? And these situations are stored in memory, right? And because they're so alike, if you make a bigger picture of this, a whole universe, is sort of a biggest level kind of reality that everybody is a part of, in a way, right? That's the universe. That's the big picture reality, right? So that universe is a story about where am I? The big picture, sort of, right? And it's a kind of thing that you can agree on, because if it's the big picture, right, everybody else has the same reality. So people start to treat it as an objective thing, as a cognitive thing. I am dealing with reality because it still fits very much with the story of that imagined reality I have when I go to sleep. I'm sort of leaving reality, but I expect it to be there in the morning. I'm, reigniting all my memories and all my imaginations, and what I see the same car, same table in the morning. I'm back in reality, but it's all based on memory and imaginations, right? It's like, it's maybe in a similar way, it's an anchor point that you are constantly getting back to. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you wake up every morning, right? But it also becomes dogmatic, because this is my objective reality. And if you suffer from naive realism, that reality actually becomes, it's the map and the territory thing, right? So that's where you have to be very careful. Time and the idea of time. Yes, and that will be my next, if I think I've covered all bases here, right? The next one, time and versus timeline. I think if you're talking about time, you have to be precise of what you're dealing with. Are you dealing with the idea of time, or are you dealing with the idea of a timeline? Because that's not necessarily the same, right? And I think it gets muddled a bit when people discuss time whenever they try to, right? What I'm saying is that's the idea of time. And I think it's purely based on memory, as I put over there furthest to the left of you, right? Or to the left in my, yeah. It's called memory Big Bang up there, right? There is a memory. I can remember some of what I did yesterday. I don't have the yesterday. I can even prove that it's a yesterday, but there's something in my memory which I consider yesterday. And because it's a yesterday, there is a notion of time. And I think it's the memory's use of storage of situations, that the spatiality, or rather than lumping all these situations in one big pile that is disorganized, and sort of which one came before the other and so on, right? Then it says, okay, the first situation, then the second situation, and the third situation, and the fourth situation, and situation, and so on. Way back to the earliest time I sort of can have memory of, right? And there was a big bang at some time. That's a starting point of my memory timeline, right? So it creates a timeline. But the points that start, each situation is not a time. It's a placement of a memorized cognition of a situation that is basically imagined, as I mentioned before. So, or a mix of a recent memory of the same situation combined into one big picture, right? A 360 photograph based on, if I pan my vision around 360 here, I can sort of, even though I only have this field of view, I can recollect what I just imagined within the same situation and create a full picture as an imagination, or an abstraction. I should say an abstraction, and then store that in memory. And I think that's basically what's going on, right? You might attach some emotion to these situations, right? This was my 10th birthday, and I had this feeling and that feeling, and I remember these colors and particular sounds. Yeah, there might be some additional stuff going on, but that's basically a situation, right? To just cut it short, I call it situation. And there's an ordered list of situations. all the way to my yesterday situation, just to be, keep it simple, right? My yesterday situation was my situation 578,132 situation, right? And a long list of memories, right? And I suppose that as you get older, your memory starts to, and you're not as good as, your short-term memory is sort of, what the hell, where did I put my glasses, right? But because your old memory is sort of locked, it's carved in stone, right? You have used it so many times, now it's sort of locked in your memory. Old people tend to be very good at remembering their youth and childhood, but they can't remember what they did yesterday, right? So there's something, as you get old and you have a full memory, memory full, right? So, and the next one is not a memory, but I put down, but that's the now. That's my actual situation now, which is this combination of cognitions and, lingo and in the now. This is the now. It's not memory, but that situation is going to be the next memory or the next situation in my memory, right? So I'm constantly shoving new situation into my memory. And maybe that's why, I'm just hazarding a guess here, right? Maybe the memory is sort of sometimes when you're sleeping. It's sort of saying, do I need that situation 982 that I haven't used since, like, all the other situations that has been shoved into my face since the Big Bang, right? Big Bang, mommy and daddy, right? Banging. Know what I'm getting at, right? Maybe I should shove that situation up. He doesn't use it anymore, that idiot, right? So situation 972, when I had my foot hurt on the door when I was 3 years old, right? I don't need it anymore, do I? He doesn't use it anymore, so I shove it out. And then during sleep, it shoves it out. But it's sort of the checking service there is just looking at this old memory and say, well, do I need this? Or yeah, okay, throw it out. That's why you're dreaming, because your memory is trying to, I'm running out of space now. He never buys a new hard disk, right? So I have the memory or RAM, right? Random access memory. He never buys new RAM. He never upgrades his RAM, right? And I guess he can't do it. So I have to get rid of something because he keeps shoving new situation into me. So I'm tossing out some of the old situation he doesn't use anymore. And that's why you dream. So when it's timeline, there's a crucial aspect of a timeline, which is an extension of memory through my now into what I call the future. And because there's this strict sense of time delineation of situations within my memory, that kind of, sense of time, I am extending it from the now into what I call the future. And the future is what can potentially become a now at some point, but not yet, right? I expect a now to be able to arrive, right? And it's the expectation. It's even more abstract, the idea of a future, than the idea of an external world. And this is one of the reasons why I think time becomes so difficult to deal with, because of this future idea, right? I'm not saying there's inherently anything wrong about the idea of the future. Just make sure you don't, right? Okay, so instead of if people have to agree, discuss shit, right? They can't say, well, I have a sense of time in my memory. Let's use that as a measure stick of time. You can't do that because you don't have access to memory, right? My memory. I don't have access to your memory. So in order to agree upon something that could be, we need a kind of a clock, And that's why, in order to agree on the idea of time, we need a clock. And what has been used back in the day, supposedly, is like the sun and the moon and floods and maybe menstrual cycles and whatever that has a kind of seemingly irregularity, that I have a memory of this regularity. Do you have the memory of the same regularity? Yes. So we can use that cognitive based or objective time measure as a clock for discussing the future. Right? 3 o'clock tomorrow, we will meet. Well, that's an artificial clock we have created, but the idea of the clock is that it's extremely precise. The moon and the sun might not be as useful because of the resolution. I mean, there would only be tomorrow or tomorrow after. It's not, tomorrow is a long time span, right? So it could be at noon or at when the sun sets in the whatever, right? So the more precision, but a clock has division up into seconds, right? Very, very, very short intervals. So you can be precise about your agreement. It's not 12:35, it's 12:36 that we need to meet, if you need that, right? Okay. So I think that's how to, but I forgot to mention, if you think of this in the middle, between memory and future, the memory of the past and the future are still just abstractions down there in abstraction land, right? In my ontology. But I am taking them out of my abstraction and placed them in an abstract way around my complete ontology. It's not because I'm dealing with something outside. I'm just taking these particular abstraction and creating a new abstraction, which is a timeline. So I can take some abstractions and use them to create new abstractions. And that one I can take to create even new abstractions and new abstractions and new abstractions. And this is a point. The abstraction upon abstraction upon abstraction, this is where many a philosopher goes wrong, right? Because if you're basing philosophy on something that is not qualia or cognitions, there's only one thing left, and that is the abstractions. And that's what they do. They create another abstraction, then another abstraction, then another abstraction, and abstraction. And Bernardo Kastrup uses the abstraction of consciousness or mind. What the hell is it? I'm not experiencing any mind or consciousness. I have mentioned mind as a term, a catch-all term for all of this, right? Including that part of my ontology, you could say, that I'm not experiencing. That could a part of be what is my so-called inside that I'm not experiencing. There could be an outside to that I'm not experiencing either. But in order to deal with all of it, you might call it mind. But that doesn't mean I'm experiencing mind or have it's made of mind or anything like that. That's the level of abstraction that basically all philosophers, they go mental on this. And they keep digging in the abstractions, and I find a new abstraction and a new abstraction, right? And a good way to see this is when they start to define shit, it explodes into inflation, right? They have the idea of consciousness. Now I'm going to use 5 new terms to define what consciousness is. Okay, if you have to define consciousness, you also have to define the terms you're using to define consciousness. Okay, so then you have to use 5 words to define that word, and that word, that word, that word, that. Now you have 25 terms maybe. And there might, among these 25 terms, there might even be overlappings. You see the inflationary potential of bad philosophy. So, you have to stay put, right? You have to do it well, otherwise it's going to blow up in your face. So, thank you for listening. I hope this answers a few questions that I might not have dealt with to sufficiently in my prior slides. So as I said, I kind of try to find a level of meta, not to go too deep, but sometimes I might get sort of pass over something that might not be okay. I'm not sure I follow, or that he can jump that far or whatever, right? So I'm trying to fill in holes that I might not have sufficiently explained. So I hope that comes across. And if you have a question, please let me know. Comment down below, right? And please share, like, and subscribe, and all that good stuff. Thank you for a like. If you don't mind, I would like you to give me a like. If you don't mind, if you think this is not too bad, at least give me a like, right? And if you want to share with people who do philosophy or want to get to something that I'm trying to get to, you might want to give them a hint that I'm doing this shit here, right? And I have a Discord board and the links below, so come join if you want to have a discussion, and we'll take it from there, right? And otherwise, see you in the next one.